We're going to be working on a dimension verification exercise, and in this exercise we have some features. We've been given a part that has all these features in it, and we want to ensure that we have 100% of these dimensions in our drawing. This could happen if an engineer made a part and said, I want you to create a drawing of my part and all the design intent, all the dimensions are in there. I just want you to retrieve them and make a drawing from it per the ASME standard. So what I'm going to do is we've already created a drawing format here and got it all set up. Remember that you may not want this note right here. One thing that I like to do is I like to fill all these things in, including the initial release, which should be the same date as the date of the creation of the drawing, and put in all my notes. So I'm going to put in on the directions, it says 6061 aluminum in all caps. So I'm going to put in 6061 aluminum, AL, and then I'm going to take off this last one because I may have hidden lines, but let's just leave it in there for a minute because it may be a little bit cluttered. All of our text should be 0.12 minimum per the ASME standard in Arial font. What I'm going to do here is I don't need sheet 2, so I can right click and delete that sheet. Don't need it. You can always insert a new sheet this way, or right click and say new sheet over here where the sheets are. I'm going to put in a base view, and since I already have a part open, it assumes that I want the base view of that part. When I drag my cursor over, it's going to show me a preview of my view. Now if I wanted to orient it in an easier way than remembering what's top, left, and front and back, I'm going to hit this button right here. This button allows me to turn it in whatever orientation I want to start with. I can even rotate at an angle here if I want to. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want this view, say finish custom view, and that's my orientation if it weren't before. So I'm going to set this down. Any feature that I have to show another view for it. If there's a feature on a face, I can never dimension to hidden lines, so I have to have a view for every face that has a feature on it. So I'm going to select this one. That gives me the holes on this side, and then I have to turn it around, so I'm going to select another one. But see, it only wants to project off this base view. So I'm going to right click and say create. If you can't understand what it wants you to do, right click. Right? So if it doesn't stop creating views, just say right click. I'm going to hit escape out of that. Let's go ahead and I should have done this before, but I'm going to make projected views now. From here, I need one on the bottom for that bottom hole. I need one on the left. And see, they're just boxes right now for their location. So I'm going to right click and create. So now you can see that my hidden lines might get a little bit cluttered. One thing that I might want, I have to have a back view for this counter bore hole. So in order to project from this view, I'm going to have to project from that base view over here. And create. I don't have anything on the top. I've got something on this side, I've got something on the bottom, and I've got something on the back. Now one thing that I like to do, and I'm going to show you this real quick. If I go back to the part, I can drag the end of the part up to the very first extrusion. When I go back to the drawing, that's all I have on my drawing. So if I go, I'm going to spread these views out a little bit. And I'm going to retrieve the dimensions for this feature. So I'm going to select on the view, right click, retrieve dimensions. And it says, do you want it for a feature or the entire part? If I just select this feature right here, it gives me all those dimensions. Now one thing that you notice is that I shared a sketch that had points in it that located all the holes as well as the outside extrusion. So maybe I only want certain dimensions. So let's get the overalls. I want this one, and this one, the width. Let's see what else. Is that it? We got the height, the width, the depth of this. We've got this. And let's say apply. And let's select this view. Now I need the depth of that extrusion. And there's that depth. So I'm going to select the 0.75 depth and I'm going to drag it out. Apply. And now I can drag them anywhere that I want. Whenever you retrieve dimensions, they're not going to be located with the offsets from the origins correctly. They may be on the part, so you're going to want to move them around. Remember that you need an offset from origin that's 032 to 062. So just drag the end of the dimension line to the end of the object. In other words, you're going to set the dimension, the dimension should be set down as close to the object as possible, and the end point should be from the closest possible point on the part. So I'm going to drag this one over as well. Alright, so we have all the features, all the dimensions for that feature. Does that look right? Okay, one thing that I noticed though on my input sheet, it says place 2 dimensions on all objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on a dimension and I'm going to go to edit the dimension style. What this does is it lets me edit the dimension style for all dimensions such as the precision. I'm going to change that to 2 places and say done. Yes. Now all my dimensions are 2 places. I'm going to go back to my part and I'm going to resume the next feature. Go back to my drawing and I can actually go right here into the cylinder head frame. There's that hole that I just retrieved. So I can select on this feature and right click, retrieve dimensions, and I can select that feature from the feature tree. Now that is a counterbore hole with a thread in it. So we don't retrieve dimensions for threaded features. So here's what we do. We go to annotation and we go to hole and thread note. Even if it's not a threaded feature, this is the only way that you can get the depth of a blind hole, and it will automatically put it in here. So I'm going to select the largest of all the circles as if they're a group. You always dimension to the largest of the counterbores or the countersinks, or the largest of the group of the features. Now it gives me all the thread specification. But I still need to retrieve the location of that hole. So I'm going to select on this view, right click, retrieve dimensions. For this feature it was 1 sketch. So there's the X location of that hole and the Y location of that hole. And say OK. One thing that I forgot to do that I love to do every time is I'm going to make every one of these views have all their automated center lines. So what I did was I selected on one view, held down Control together, right click and said automated center lines. In this I want projected axial center lines, I want holes, I want cylindrical features, I want revolves, I want circular patterns. And I'll say OK. So now I have all the center lines in all my views. I don't have to worry about that anymore. One thing is that this has a correct offset from origin, but if I grab this, most of the time in Inventor, I like to pull this to the end of the center mark. That way I'm not overlapping that offset from origin. So grab this, and if I already have my center mark on here, I would just been able to move that there. So now I have the X and Y location, I have the complete callouts for this hole. I'm going to go back to the part. And I can actually, if I extended this part here, can I drag this inner part down? I have to do it in the part. So I'm going to drag the inner part to the next hole. I have 4 countersink holes, which are in the first sketch. And if you see this first sketch, you can see what it looks like. That's why that keeps coming up. I created one sketch to create the holes from, all the 2 different types of holes and the extrusion at the same time, and I shared it. See, that uses sketch 1, this uses sketch 1, and so does this one. I just use the points for the different sizes of holes. So I'm going to go back to the drawing, and now that's showing up. Once again, once you have all these, I guess it would be better to put your automated center lines in, but I'm going to put those in again. All my settings stayed the same. That's something that we need to go back and change in our application options. So now I'm going to select hole and thread notes on the outer circle of the group, and it gives me my countersinks. If I double click on this, it won't let me edit anything. The way that we edit the quantity, this does not work. Number of holes in a pattern. Okay. Still doesn't work. So I'm going to double click on this and I take off Use Default. That lets me edit this text. And I'm going to put 4x space in there for the quantity. Now I'm going to retrieve dimensions on this again. And I'm going to select these holes. So I had to locate the hole from the center hole, one of them, and then locate one hole to the other. I'm going to drag these out. One trick to not crossing extension lines or dimension lines is drag the dimension right in the middle of the line and it will break it automatically. Alright, I'm going to drag these back to the end of the center marks. Make sure I've got all those at the end of the center marks. Click on the dimension, it'll show you the end. Make sure they're not overlapping each other. When I bring that over there, it breaks that one. Extension lines can cross extension lines. We cannot cross a dimension line. The dimension line surrounds the dimension, if you can remember it that way. That's the ASME standard. So I'm just going to make sure that I've got all these pulled out. I'm sorry to take you guys through this because you may remember this, but better safe than sorry. Alright. Okay, so we have all those located. Here's another one. If they're overlapping, you're going to have two that you're going to have to do this way, unfortunately. Pardon? He said I had one more. So which one is it? This one? There's one. Click on the dimension and drag the extension line. Okay, very good. So now we've got those in there. We've located the holes. One thing is that we have two of these holes that are 0.88 apart. One way to do this is there is an axial center line, and that means that they're both in alignment. So if I click on this hole and this hole, it'll put that continuation line in there and I don't have to put 2x. Uh-oh. This one to this one. And let's do this one to here. And you see the center line type come in there? Instead of stretching your axes, this is what you want to do. Okay, so now I don't have to put 2x on those. And I don't need this one anymore, do I? Don't need that, and I don't need this because I've got that and that continuation line. Essentially, we're locating this first hole from the center of this hole, which is already located, and then locating this hole from this one. Does that make sense to you?
Did one of those disappear, the first one you did?
I deleted these two because I've got it over here and I've got...
No, the center line that you first did, over on the right, between those two.
Oh, good. The question was, did it disappear? So I have to select this one to this one again, probably because I deleted that dimension and it was on that center line. Very good. Good eye. All right. So in order to move dimensions, you're going to grab on that green dot. If you grab on the text, it's going to stretch the landing, which is that little horizontal line. All right, so I've got those. So you guys got the idea here? Now I'm going to extend down the next part. And where is that hole? That hole is a huge flat bottom hole on the back. Now if you called out a hole and you called out a blind depth and I used a 118-degree tip, it's going to blow through that thread, isn't it? So what we do with a flat bottom hole is we call it out as a counterbore. A flat bottom hole is called out as a counterbore so that they know that they're going to use a flat end mill. I'm going to go back to the drawing, and there it is over here. So if I do a hole and thread note, I'm going to select this one, and it doesn't have a counterbore symbol on it. So if I double click on it, take off this, I can come in here. All of these are smart parameters that are used to create, that were used to create that. But if I just want a symbol, I'm going to put a counterbore symbol in there, and that's going to tell them it's a flat end mill that has this diameter, and that's how deep it is. It's located on the center of this hole, so I don't have to have any more dimensions on that one. Right, next one, IPT. Go down to the next sketch. This sketch looks like it's shared between this size hole and these two size holes. So I'm going to bring this on down. There's a center hole that comes in from the head. And I'm going to go ahead and drag the next one down too, because those are using the same sketch. Let's see, let me grab that hole 7. That one breaks through, but it's actually 2 holes there. If I go to the drawing, and I'm going to use automated center lines on this one view because, well, I need it on all views, don't I? So, once again, automated center lines. Every time you resume a hole, you're going to have to do automated center lines and say OK. So now it puts axial center lines in. So if I didn't want all these center lines, they're starting to get really busy, all these hidden lines. Which one is my base view? If I come over here and I look at sheet 1, there's my first view. That's my base view for all the rest of these. This was projected from here, and this one was projected from here. So this is the parent. So if I go here to this first view, and I edit that view, I can say I don't want that to have hidden lines. This is hidden line, this is shaded, and this is hidden lines removed. Say OK. Unless you tell it otherwise, it's not going to show the hidden lines in any of the other views, because that's the parent and everything else is established from the parent view. If I wanted hidden lines in just this view, I'd right click and edit this view, and there's this little icon right here. It says style your hidden lines, or no hidden lines are shaded, from your base view. That's your parent view. If you take that off, you can make this hidden line. But I'm going to leave them all without hidden lines, so that allows me to have this node as well. Now I don't need all these axial center lines. So you guys can be smarter than me, and you can just say, I don't want any hidden lines at first, and it won't put these axial center lines in. Alright, so I'm going to go to hole and thread notes. I'm going to select, can I select the thread, or do I select the visible hole? Never any hidden lines, so the threads are hidden. Select on that. Take off use default. I'm going to put a 2x in here. Say OK. And now I need a hole and thread node on this one. If it didn't have a depth, that hole would blow all the way through this part. So that's why I use hole and thread notes on that instead of just calling it out. It gives me my depth. Alright, now I'm going to retrieve the dimensions for this hole, and it gives me all the dimensions for every one of those holes because I shared the sketches. So if I say select dimensions, I can just draw a box around that and say apply and cancel. I don't need this one. Alright, so I've got this. I can drag this one up. So what we have here is we have the location of the center hole. We have the location in the Y of all 3. The lines are going through, so that makes them fine. From the center hole, I locate one hole, and from one hole, I locate the other. And let's go ahead and drag this one on down to the bottom so that we're not crossing any dimension lines. So that kind of located every hole for me. Go back to the part, resume the next feature. All you're doing here is verifying that you have every dimension for every feature, feature by feature by feature, by just resuming each feature and doing it one by one. Otherwise, you're going to try and put all your dimensions in there, and then you're going to have to hand verify everything. So this makes a lot of sense to me. I do a lot of things like this, especially if I didn't create the part. Hole and thread note. So let's do automated center lines here first. Now, if you don't have hidden lines, it's not going to put the axial center lines in the adjacent views, which is really nice. So now let's do retrieve dimensions. And I'm just going to select these two because I don't want that diameter. I'm going to put the hole and thread notes call out on there because these are blind as well. Double click, take off use default, and 2x. Alright, do you see that these are in line? So let's put that axial center line in, from this hole to the bottom one. Alright, so now they're all in alignment and they're all 0.38 from one side. Going back to the part, we only have this and the fillet, that bottom hole. So I'm going to automated center lines. Say OK. And let's retrieve the dimensions. And then just select the two dimensions that you want, or select all of them and delete the whole dimension. Hole and thread notes. That'll give you the depth. Where's my depth? If the depth doesn't come out on the hole and thread note, you're going to double click on it, take off use default. I want a smart parameter of the depth of the hole. Now it doesn't have the symbol. Double click on it, put a space in here, put in the depth symbol, and this comes from the hole creation. That's a parameter from the creation of the hole that you told it how deep it was. This is just a symbol. So now I have it in there. Sometimes it puts it in there, sometimes it doesn't. This one didn't put it in there either, did it? So let's do this one. Space, depth, and we can go to the next line if you want. Depth and hole depth. And this is counterbore depth, counterbore, countersink. And now we've got it in there. So just make sure that you get the counterbore, countersink depths when they're blind. This one too. Or when they don't go all the way through, in other words. Okay, the last thing that we have is this fillet. I'll come back to my drawing, and I'm going to retrieve the dimensions. Let's put it on this side since there's hardly anything over here. And there's 2x on this one. So go to Home, 2x. That takes you to the very front, and say OK. Alright, so your quest is to retrieve the dimensions out of this part. Some of these things you're going to have to still extend down to the end of the part. If it's a curved feature, I'm going to know that you still have an offset there, so don't worry about me counting off on that. But you're going to need to retrieve all these dimensions, and you're going to have time to do this in class, and you'll have the video to look at before you come in here next time. So I'm going to put it out on this website. YouTube, Kim Duran YouTube, okay?